Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
All right, Gordon.
Mate.
Joint video.
How's it going?
Your TikTok stuff, my Odyssey and Rumble. Yes.
I love these little chats, mate. I really do. I love them.
Yes. And we may have too much to talk about, given how interesting, far too interesting, more than interesting. Please, I'd like dull life 2019 back.
Do you remember, like, in 2016, where they're like, "Oh my god, how crazy is this?"
That's right.
The good old days of 2016 when it was like normal.
Yes, Brexit and Hitler running against Trump. That was it.
I mean, how are we going to survive? 4 years of a Trump presidency. He'll create World War III. No, pretty far from it, actually.
No.
Peace with North Korea, almost.
Yeah, Biden's on his way.
Now he's might come back. It looks like they might try and start it. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, look, let's start. Let's start with what's happening in the UK. Your take on what you think is going on in the UK.
I think there's an attempted sort of coup, almost. I think outside entities are stoking these fires. And I also think that the media and the government have created the environment for it to happen.
And who are these outside entities?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that Israel's one, because they're the ones who are paying Tommy Robinson's fees and have been funding him. I don't think it's Russia or anything like that, despite what the Daily Mail might say. But I certainly think Elon Musk has got a hand in it, which means America does, because with all the disinformation and misinformation he's been spreading recently, it's been quite worrying. Did you see what he posted about the Venezuelan elections? Turned out to be a US Postal Service voting machine that apparently he said was being passed. And it's like, is he doing this ironically, or is he, trying to muddy the waters? Because he doesn't seem to come out and apologise much after he spread all this misinformation, does he?
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I find it funny you using the term misinformation and disinformation, because I can remember the days before lockdown. It was just inaccurate reporting.
No, I think this has been done on purpose. There's no Elon Musk. If you watch Joe Rogan's new special, Joe Rogan says his conversations with Elon Musk is like a dog trying to talk to its owner, to a human. He says Elon Musk is that smart.
I didn't.
So you can't tell me. You can't tell me that Elon Musk, the owner of a massive platform like that, can't figure stuff out that is obviously fake, especially given the history with Venezuela. I mean, I've only been doing this 7 years. I mean, this is the third time they've tried this shit, and now Elon Musk is piling on. It's no wonder Maduro is having to defend his country this way. We all know why this is happening. It's happening because they've got the largest oil reserves on the planet. And that's why this is happening, and that's why Juan Guaido happened, and that's why the Bank of England withheld Venezuela's own gold and still have 1.4 billion that Venezuela needed to feed their people during COVID. Doesn't matter. We're withholding that, and your people are going to suffer, and then we'll use their suffering as in our media as a reason to paint, hey, look how bad a guy he is. This has been going on for decades. I've only been covering it for 7 years. Other people have been covering it for over 20. The United States, all of a sudden, took a big interest in Venezuela during the turn of the century. Why was that? They found a lot of oil. And now Elon Musk, he will never talk about that, but he'll show, obvious rubbish, obvious misinformation. He'll share that like, look, there's a voting machine coming through the window in Venezuela. That is in America. It's a US Postal Service thing, right? Something like that anyway. And he's been doing it quite often. Once to where he's human. To do it 3-4 times in a week, that's a pattern.
Okay, we're taking it back to the UK then, these outside agencies. So you said Israel, the US, Elon Musk, anybody else? Not Russia, not Putin.
Well, I also think that the political parties in this country are to blame for it. I also think the media has a huge part to blame in because they've fostered the environment to allow it to happen. They've demonized Muslims, they've demonized migrants, they've demonized people coming from other countries who are fleeing all sorts of stuff. And I admit we've had these conversations before that many are coming over that really, they're coming here for exploitation reasons. I totally admit that to you when we've had these conversations before. But the demonization of Muslims, the demonization of immigrants, the demonization of Muslim countries like Iraq and Iran, and anything that Iran do obviously must be bad, and everything Iraq do must be bad, and everything that Gaddafi did in Libya he was a terrible person, and only showing one side of the thing obviously has an effect on the people that you're showing it to. And they've fostered this environment where these bigots, latch on to obvious fake shit. This person who killed those 3 children, and remember how this all started. That person was a Welsh guy born in Swansea, as it turned out, to Nigerian immigrant parents. You're first generation from immigrant parents, right, Rich?
Yeah, well, I'm an immigrant.
It was somebody with your background.
I wasn't born here.
Okay, well, he was. Yeah. So he's even more British.
He's more Welsh than me.
But it didn't matter because an obvious clickbait fake website posted something that was obviously fake, and any journalist worth their salt would have checked that. This is an obscure website that posted. I remember in 2016. Do you remember the big fucking story that went around in 2016? The Pope endorses Trump. It's people to try and get. It's an internet marketing scheme that preys on the most easily led in society to try and go down, capture their emails, sell them shit, get them in the scam, sell them pills that will lose them weight, whatever. Erectile dysfunction. Here's some pills. Need a bigger cock. Here's some pills. That's the sort of website it is. And that gets spread around on Twitter. And all of a sudden, this story says that person who killed those kids was an illegal migrant called a name. A name. What does that name mean, babe? Do you remember the name, babe? Yeah, his name means I'm going to my apartment. That's what it translates to.
It's not a name.
It's not a name. It means I'm going to my apartment. And they spread it around, and before you know it, there's fucking riots on the street. Elon Musk is over there. He's retweeting shit saying Keir Starmer's going to turn the Falkland Islands into... whether he's doing it as a joke or not, he's riling up people who are easily led.
Yeah.
And he's not correcting the record. So, yes, he is at fault for this shit. And what he's got against Britain, I don't know. But he's obviously something.
Yep. I have a slightly different take. Not that different, but a little bit different.
Let me know. Okay, let's have a chat, mate, because that's my take on it. Maybe we can meet somewhere in between.
They are shit-stirring. But who's shit-stirring underneath it all are the British elites. The British elites are masters at divide and rule.
Well, I didn't cover the other bit, and I focused a little bit in my answer on... But I also said the media and the establishment in this country. I mean, obviously, you've got the Starmer thing, and we'll talk about this. Carry on.
Yeah, the British are masters at divide and rule. It's how they had such a large empire for so long as well, right? And Keir Starmer's speech, I don't listen to his speeches, but that clip that he said or whatever, we're going to protect all Muslims. No, protect all people. You're the Prime Minister. You take care of all the citizenry. And the idea that Keir Starmer is going to take care of Muslims, he really cares about people while he's bombing them or supporting the bombing of them abroad. No, you're playing us. You're grooming us. The government are grooming us. And I said to you, and I said on my channels, on my own channel, videos before, the Tories are going to do such an awful, awful job. They're going to hand Starmer a massive majority, and then he's going to push through with the Great Reset. And what this does is it stokes conflict between the people so we don't unite and see what the elites are doing to us. When it comes to identity politics, they never talk about the identity of class. It's always race or gender or sexuality or trans nonsense. It's never, ever about class. Now, these people coming over, I just recorded a video with Jim Ferguson, who was a MP candidate and an MEP candidate for the Brexit Party, and I've been on his channel a few times and him on mine. And what I spelt this out, if I can do it here with you, right, is we've got to exercise discernment, and these things are not the same. Was it the Sesame Seed Strong? One of these things is not like the other. One of these things is not like the other, right? Many people give their children the normal, regular vaccine. And then along comes this mRNA injection. They call it a vaccine, and they think it's the same. It's not the same. It works differently, produces different outcomes, but discernment was missing. An upgrade was missing. Many people care about the environment and pollution. You know, I remember, was it the Green Movement in the 70s and 80s used to be anti-war?
Now they support Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because war's not bad for the environment.
No, of course it's not.
It's good for people when you kill them en masse, right?
Yeah, we can do that as long as you pay 6 pence for a plastic bag. You'll be all right.
Who have genuine, authentic, real concerns about environment and pollution fall for CO2 as a pollutant.
Mm-hmm.
Climate change agenda. Discernment is missing. Carbon dioxide plus warmth plus water gives you plants.
You've explained this to me. It's something called photosynthesis, isn't it?
Yeah, you may have heard of it. Apparently it's very important. We shouldn't interfere with it, right? Discernment is missing. Thatcher would be turning in her grave at what this Tory administration had been doing. They're not real Tories. And people voted for them and supported them like they were real Tories. They weren't for small business. They weren't for sovereignty, like sovereignty of the household and the family. They weren't for the church. They were for big government, more taxes, more spending, more money.
They weren't Tories.
They weren't Tories. They were fake Tories. Discernment was missing. An upgrade is missing. Similarly, Keir Starmer, he's not Labour.
Exactly.
Right? People
I've
voted.
literally just written that down, mate.
But there's more to go. Discernment is missing. An upgrade is required. People voted Labour thinking that Keir Starmer is going to do better than the Tories. I was like, no, he's going to do worse because the Tories deliberately handed him a large majority, so he doesn't have any liberty-loving MPs. He's purged the liberty-loving section of his party, the left wing, like Corbyn, who voted against vaccine mandates, the injection mandates, right? So here's the other thing that's missing. Discernment is missing when it comes to what's going on right now. We need an upgrade. The old rules don't apply here. There's a different game being played. I was in London when there were the NF marches in Southall and Lewisham. I remember about
NF marches?
National Front.
Okay.
Precursors to the BNP. Outright racist party. I was in London in the 80s and 90s when there were the disturbances in Brixton and Southall and Toxteth and perhaps a few other places. This is something different. Those were black and white working class communities, mostly black communities, rubbing up against police oppression. What's happening now is different. So there's the economic migration of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which is how my parents came. Because teachers were needed, nurses were needed. The economy was expanding in the 50s and 60s. There were resources, there weren't enough people, but there were more resources that they could be accommodated. Then I've worked with Vietnamese boat people and people fleeing Cambodia, the Pol Pot. I've worked with an ex-women's minister from an African nation. When the government changed, she had to flee political persecution. Genuine asylum seekers and refugees. These military-age men coming over. Military-age men don't leave a war zone. They send their wives and children. These military-age men coming over to Ireland, where 1 in 3 19 to 39-year-olds are now these recent arrivals. That's not the same as before. When the economic migrants come over, like my parents, we worked, we paid taxes, we were involved and integrated in society, even if they didn't mix with local people. You know, you're working in a mill in Bradford, you're only mixing with other Pakistanis in that mill, but you're integrated into the functioning of society. You've got to keep your nose clean. The Brixton riots, Toxteth riots, Southall riots, what never happened was gangs of local people, local men, masked up, balaclavaed up, wearing jackets, going around harassing white people. Why? Because those are your neighbours. In Brixton, you don't go around harassing the white people because you've got to mix with them and work with them. This is something different. I remind you of Operation Northwood, which you'll know about. I'll remind you of Operation Gladio. And for people who don't know, Northwood was a CIA plot to explode a bomb on US soil, kill Americans, and blame Cuba to justify a war with Cuba. Operation Gladio was the Italian intelligence service, the British MI6, and the CIA working together to kill Italians through a domestic bombing campaign and blame it on the Italian communists. There are all these markers. And then in the previous riots, the Brixton and Southall and all of that, when Thatcher was in power, she said, we need calm. We're not going to tolerate anything. She didn't say, oh, we're just going to take care of black people. She didn't say, oh, we're just going to take care of white people, or we're just going to take care of the Sikhs in Southall. No, we're going to stop this. We're going to take care of everybody. Starmer is stirring the shit. And I think too many people are falling for it. And you talked about demonizing Muslims. Well, they're demonizing Britons by othering them. 11 million reform voters are far right. No. The hashtag Farage riots. That's demonizing traditional British, white, if you like, conservative polity. Setting us up against each other. Favoring Muslims, the establishment favoring Muslims, or being seen like as media ploy.
It's like how?
Well, we know when Starmer says, we're going to take care of Muslims, and then there's a police conference, see it on Twitter, right? But in order to provoke a reaction. And then the other thing about what I said about the protest before, the National Front marches happened in Lewisham and Southall. The riots were in Toxteth and Southall and Brixton, areas with large black communities. Where are these protests happening? On Wednesday, there was a call out, we were told not to go into our offices. Our council offices were closed because of fear of protests. My office is based in a small little English town where there's a Waitrose and the old biddies from the church. What, they're going to smash up the place? But no, stay at home. Be afraid. Lockdown 2.0, the government will come to the rescue. Tony Benn said, how you control a people is you make them afraid and you demoralize them. The way the government are operating, stoking fear and demoralizing people. That's my take on it. And then there are useful idiots like Robbie Tomlinson.
Let's talk about him a little bit because we mentioned Israel,
mm-hmm.
And he's been one of the. I mean, he was one of the. First of all, he was one of the guys that was spreading the rumor that the guy who killed those 3 children came over from a boat and was an illegal immigrant, which he wasn't. And if any so-called journalist, by the way, which is what Tommy, or Tel Aviv Tommy, as I heard him called,
he'll like that.
Tel Aviv Tommy spread. I saw a video here where he was like afterwards, and after all of this happened, he was like, "What do you expect? Men will rise up if you do this and you come and take their shit. Men will rise up." I'm like, yeah, but you never seem to understand that when it comes to anybody who's a victim of British foreign policy, do you, Tommy, or Israeli foreign policy, for instance? I mean, what do you expect Palestinians to do when Israelis are putting them in apartheid and an illegal occupation and now a genocide?
Rioting for the right to rape Palestinian prisoners.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a false equivalence there, right? Tel Aviv Tommy, who gets £10,000 a month, or got £10,000 a month from the owner of one of these illegal settlements that in Israel just putting literal fascists in to terrorize the Palestinians who've been there for centuries while they expand these territories. And that's who's paying all of these legal fees and sending him money so he can go over to Ayia Napa. By the way, he's in Ayia Napa right now. If I was him, I'd probably seek asylum elsewhere, because the minute he touches this soil, he's going to prison for a long time this time.
Gordon, I see parallels with this particular PSYOP, this particular project. Same with COVID and lockdowns. You had useful idiots. You had doctors and scientists and stuff saying, no, you got to have the injections, and it turns out they were being paid for by Pfizer.
He's got a Rolex now, so,
Yeah.
Probably got a few.
People sell their souls. Starmer sold his soul, right? Clearly. Now, the answer is to not fall into that binary trap and to stand for unity.
I agree. Totally.
And
And
then point this out. And then we got to be careful about not demonizing and othering.
no, yeah, I understand. You've got to stop lumping. I mean, trying to lump 30% of people into supporting what these rioters and terrorists, they tried to burn down a hotel with them. That's terrorism for political aims. That's the very definition. This is not.
The real terrorists are the ones shaking the jar of ants.
Exactly. And this feeds into what you were saying about Starmer, because he won't call them terrorists. He will call them thugs and right-wing thugs. It's like, you can't put all of those people into the right-wing category for the start, because I dare say that most of those people are anti-war. That's not a right-wing point of view. I dare say most of these people are actually, for fairness in sport. That's not a right-wing point of view. Yeah, I could go on and on and on. So we've got to stop putting large swathes of people into but one other category. We're not racist. You are. Because we've seen what happens in America when you propagandize and dumb down a society for that to happen. You just get a load of people arguing with each other and nobody making any sense at all. Meanwhile, the status quo continues and you will get your liberties taken away and free speech and blah, 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 blah. And it's happening more and more over here. I totally understand it. But the media, I want to point out this the media that I touched on earlier, they are for sure one of the main perpetrators of fostering this environment for this to happen. Because, first of all, I mean, look at the election that we've just had. Who was the anti-war party? The left party, the anti-war party, Rich, the Workers' Party, right? How much airtime did they give them?
Nothing.
None. Even though they had a sitting MP who has been elected 4 times, and there was no. How many times did they prop up Mr. Farage, who has lost every election up to that point, who has very few councillors? How many times did they talk to the Greens, who have like 1,000 councillors or something like that? When it was totally the disparity there. You can clearly see that there was a narrative that they were pushing. Now, to what ends, I don't know. That might have been reactionary, whatever. But then you've got on the other side of propping up Mr. Farage, you've also got the dumbing down of society with the fake anti-Semitism fucking scandal against Jeremy Corbyn, the rise of Sir Keir Starmer. Remember, Sir Keir Starmer, who comes out and says, we want a safe environment for Muslims. Do you remember his party was found out to have a hierarchy of racism?
Yeah, but no, a safe place for Muslims, except for the ones that live in Yemen.
Right.
Which the British government is
bombing. The Palestinians, because oh, by the way, it's a head fake. They've stopped selling stuff to Israel. No, they haven't. They've put a pause. On approving more sales. They haven't stopped any of the previous sales. They've put a pause on any more contracts. Those previous contracts will go on for years. Some of them. They've just put don't be fooled by the headlines.
Well, some good news for you, Gordon. Well, if my opinion becomes news, Israel's not going to prevail.
No,
it's not. Right? Starmer's not going to see out his term.
You think?
He's not. And here's why. Right now, I've not looked in a crystal ball or anything like that. I'm just looking at the man and how he operates and conducts himself. Now, here's some good news. So he's a global leader for the WEF. That's not good news, right? The good news is he's the best that they could get. He's awful. He's absolutely awful. And in the US, right, they got Kamala Harris. Really? These are the titans that are going to oppress us? You think seriously? So here's why why I think he's not going to prevail, right? He's not going to see out his term. So he's got no base. None.
No.
1 in 5 of the electorate voted Labour. And many of those Labour voters, I bet, held their nose, and they voted because they're not going to vote Tory or whatever, or because they didn't exercise any discernment and they think it's the same. And very quickly they're going to discover he's not the same. He's not Labour. He's not Labour. They're going to push through more and more legislation, more oppressive legislation, including legislation which will have the effect of robbing people of their homes. They're going to take property away from homeowners.
We talked about this a little bit, and I haven't dropped that video yet. We really need to.
Yeah. Okay. So they're going to take property away from homeowners. So more and more, the stuff that he's going to do as he pushes the agenda, because they're running out of time, it's going to get more and more resistance. He has no political acumen. Tony Blair, you could say, certainly the first election, he had a lot of support. First time he got elected, right? Thatcher, Scargill, Farage, Galloway. They're smart people. They got convictions. They have acumen. Even Boris Johnson can play the game well. Starmer is talentless. He can't even read a speech without checking it every 2 seconds because he's such an empty, vacuous puppet. Talentless, completely talentless. How on earth is he going to negotiate the challenges that are going to confront him? And those poor sods who are banking on him, he's the best one they got.
I find it funny, with Starmer. I find it funny that, like, his initial reaction when this happened was pretty lame. And, what happened, you saw how the police were pushed back they were pushed back, remember? And they set the hotels on fire and stuff. The police and they stood there and they didn't know what to do. And then the next day, communities came out in their thousands. And then Keir Starmer was like, oh, these sentences, they're really showing them. Meanwhile, he's giving out sentences for, let's face it, terrorist acts that are far short of what they gave the Just Stop Oil protesters. And I'm not behind those. We've spoke about this. We're not behind those protests. But 5 years for planning a peaceful protest that might have caused a bit of a traffic jam and cost the state some money. 5 years for planning that. Not a peaceful protest. Nobody was going to get hurt. Meanwhile, 3 years for beating up a paramedic in a violent, racist riot while acts of terrorism are going on. It's making a mockery of our judicial system, this is. And Keir Starmer, remember, was head of the Crown Prosecution Service for a long time. And his record with regards to Jimmy Savile and Julian Assange are dodgy as F.
Yeah. Now, I think in terms of the charges, right, and the sentencing, I think criticisms can be made, valid criticism from both sides, right? Like the people making offensive social media or Facebook posts.
Yeah, I'm not saying.
But what it serves to stir the shit.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a little bit like you said, like in a classroom. Gordon, Rich said this about you. Rich, Gordon said this about you, and then standing back and get on with it. Sorry,
shaking the jar.
Yeah, shaking the jar. That's all that it serves to do. And then they can use it in order to suppress freedom of speech and freedom of expression, so that so that they can better control the narrative as they push forward the rest of their agenda, destroying the food supply, net zero, robbing people of their homes through high taxation. And this all serves to do is it serves to destroy the nation, make it weak, so then that robs it of any opportunity of sovereignty, including the whole thing about sending arms. Denmark and Britain and France and Germany, emptying their armaments, their ordnance warehouses, sending everything to Ukraine where it just gets mashed up by the Russians, and then being short themselves without the manufacturing capacity to replace them. Well, what does that do? Well, it robs a country of sovereignty. The only way you can ever get involved in any sort of military engagement is through some globalist alliance. They're out to destroy. It all fits in with destroying sovereignty, destroying national sovereignty, and promoting globalism. And these military age men, I've heard rumors. I don't know if it's true, but I've learned these last 4 years, a lot of the rumors, a lot of the things that people have said have turned out to be accurate, that these military age men are military. from the UN, from other countries, planted in lots and lots of cities and towns all over the UK, because that was something else that struck me on Wednesday when they said there's going to be disturbances in 100 cities across the UK. Small places. Why are they putting these migrants in small places? Before, they've always gravitated to the large conurbations where there's large communities already. Why would you want to put 1,500 Muslim men in a small village outside York? And then in Widnes and in Wigan and in Southampton and places like that, little places. Why'd you do that? Well, because then you have potentially, if they are soldiers, UN soldiers stationed all over the place. But the other thing that you do, even if that doesn't happen, through these protests, you create fear everywhere. If you're in Wigan, you now need to be afraid in the same way that people in Brixton or Southall needed to be afraid, because the protest is coming to your little country town. Because that's what we're talking about in the city where I live. Are you kidding? Gordon, I went to an EDL march when EDL were alive and kicking, right, in the city that I live. It was laughable. There was about 100 EDL that came in by train. They were outnumbered by the police, and the police were there to protect them from the thousands and thousands and thousands of counter protesters. I've never seen anything like it, right? It was just incredible. And now we're going to be, apparently about 20 odd people turned up in the city where I live.
But isn't this what's going to happen, Rich? This is why I pointed out Starmer taking credit for what the people did the next day. Because we got word of all these things. And I'm not sure whether it was hoax or whatever, but people showed up. Yeah. And it's like you said with the EDL march there. And, we saw what happened in Walthamstow. And we've seen other places like Brighton where 7 guys turned up and there's thousands of people and the police had to cordon them off. Isn't that basically what's happening here? I almost feel like right now, there's no point really in Starmer saying anything or the police saying anything, because we're going into the weekend where they're saying that some of these marches, some of these riots and whatever you might start. Because of the way social media is right now, it's going to get out really quick. For instance, I heard a story of a lady, I forget where it was now, but she was like a 50-year-old white woman or something like that, and she turned the corner. She was going home, and her house was half a mile away. And there's like one of these riots going on right in front of her, and she was like, "What can I do?" She went live on TikTok. Was like, "I'm really scared," and people were like, "Oh, all right, I live around the corner, right there." And literally, they turn up while she's live on TikTok. Within a few minutes, "Stay with me, love. You're all right. We'll get you through this crowd." Before you know it, dozens of people surrounding her, ushering you through the crowd. And this is before the response that we saw the next day when these 100 protests, etc., were planned or what have you. And we saw the anti. And by the way, it's so funny. The BBC called these terrorist riots. It's so funny. They called them pro-British, and then they called the counter protesters anti-racist. So it's like, wait, is pro-British racist now? So this is exactly what the BBC did within like 24 hours.
MAGA is racist, isn't it?
Incredible.
MAGA is racist.
Sorry?
MAGA is racist. If you wear a MAGA hat or something, or a MAGA supporter, you're racist.
Talk about trying to muddy the waters and making no sense whatsoever, and not informing your electorate whatsoever at all. But my point is, I don't think there's going to be much police presence needed. And if anybody in that group of people who think they're going to go out this weekend and cause riots, the same way that happened over the last week, some of them are going to get hurt, because now the people in this country are aware of it and they're looking for it and they're going to get organised. And I saw something just before we went live. I forget where it was now, but it was somewhere. Some protesters turned up within minutes. They're outnumbered 100 to 1 because of the way social media works. And that's what's going to happen this weekend. And if they turn out, somebody is going to get hurt. The police aren't needed anymore.
Then the media and the government will play it not to placate and calm people down. They'll play it in order to shit stir.
Yeah, and obviously in order to bring in more draconian and authoritarian. But we need to be smart, and we need to try and that's why we do this, to try and educate people on what's going on. There's clearly a divide and conquer here. It's clear that Keir Starmer and his opposite side, if you want to call that, with Nigel Farage, have both been a pawns in this. It's clear that the media have fostered this environment, demonising Muslims. And then when the people come out and say, hey, love won, you can't have it both ways, you racist shit. You can't call groups of gangs of brown people going around and doing stuff, Asian gangs and Muslim gangs, and then when gangs of white people do it, you don't even mention that it's white people. It's just people. They're just, you know what? These people online, they're just keyboard warriors. They're not inciting hate. They're not Muslim, brown people inciting. They're just keyboard warriors. It's this language that has fostered this bigotry and this hate against an entire people that, if they ever got to know, would probably be for their friends and neighbours.
Yeah, well, Gordon, I think the bigotry and the othering is happening to both communities. It is like, Gordon, this is what Rich said about you. Rich, this is what Gordon said about you. It is like that because British people, local people, white people, English people are getting othered as far right. Well, you can't. I mean, what's that hump? What's it called? That distribution curve or whatever, right? You can't have 13 million Reform voters or 11 million, I think it was, right, as far right. No, they're just conservatives, traditional conservatives. The actual far right, the NF, the BNP lot, they're tiny. Same as with the extreme Islamists on the other side. They want everyone converted to Islam at the point of a sword. They're tiny. But so you don't want to be painting any group of people because that's all about divide and rule. The only way to paint people is, I think, along class lines, perhaps, right? So that we can unite as one against the common enemy, which is the British elite.
Well, this is what I keep saying over and over and over. You're fighting amongst yourselves, and you're not your enemies. That's your neighbour. That's your friend. That's your. You just got to give them time. Don't let them divide you.
But that's the thing. When I said about the gangs of these guys in balaclavas and masks and going around attacking people, and right, those are the military-age migrants. Genuine refugees and genuine immigrants that are working here don't do that because you've got to be responsible. You got your I don't want to go to prison. I got my family. I'm not going to go and do that. I got to live with these people. But the migrants in the hotels, in the military camps, they don't have any such reservations. This is what they're here to do.
So, here's my question to you then, Rich. If Keir Starmer and the Tories and what have you are in sort of like two wings of the same bird, and just, you know, they're taking their orders from who are they?
Globalists, the WEF.
Who are the people that are controlling?
The globalists, the WEF, Davos, and then whoever's behind them, pulling the strings.
Stop that. It's time we unite and come together.
And I'm really encouraged by this conversation with you, right? Because you said at the beginning there's things we may not agree on, right? But I actually think we've once again agreed on mostly pretty much everything, right? Slight variations and stuff. But people are waking up. People are waking up. People who had the injections aren't trusting of the government and what the government say. And more people are waking up. And I think what you said about what happened with this woman, more and more people are waking up. And the fact that Wednesday was such a shower. I mean, really, who's going to protest on a work night?
It was a bit weird, that was, wasn't it?
I've got to go to work, right? The only ones who are going to do that are the migrants languishing in hotels, waiting for the authoritarians, WF, to give them their instructions because they don't have to go to work.
Did you my friend Fiona, our friend Fiona, has been silenced basically from posting anything from social media until at least September, because they say that her videos make somebody anxious. I'm wondering see if they're doing that to her and nobody's reporting on it. I obviously have many times, but nobody in the media have been reporting on it at all. And what has actually been said about that in whatever papers has been very thinly sourced, shall we say. She can't post stuff on social media. This person who originally sort of was the person that spread the false rumor that the guy whose name was "I'm going back to my apartment" killed those three people and was a boat person. based upon a spurious report from a very dodgy website without any. She's been arrested today. I fear that the punishments now that are going to be handed out to people are going to be accelerated. And whenever I point out that there's a disparity here in the sentences handing out to what I think are terrorists, an act of terrorism, are less than the protests that we're giving out to just stop all peaceful protesters, just planning peaceful protests. That's not to say that I think that these people should get more of a sentence and we need to clamp down even harder, because that's the fascist tendency, right? I actually am pointing out that you shouldn't be jailing people for peaceful protests.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to make. And I would like to make that clear, because that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they're gonna punish us, try and punish us, suppress our voices, and we just have to unite and say no. This is how you deal with abusers. You say no. You stand up and you say no. I'm not taking this no more. Peacefully.
Which they've made now a precedent that planning peaceful protests is more punishable than violent racist riots and acts of terrorism.
Which serves the purpose of keeping people fearful and demoralized. All right, Gordon.
It's been a good chat, Rich. I thought we were going to disagree more. I really did.
Yeah, I thought so too. Next time you got to be more disagreeable, okay? Say no.
We'll see. I'll that was the play.
Gordon, thank you so much. Relevant links in the description below and everything, and share this far and wide. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.